What do you think is the best vampire movie of all time? I don't know. The movie that I am reviewing today is certainly not the best vampire movie of all time. It's not the best Marvel movie of all time, but it's not a bad movie. The movie I'm talking about today is Blade from 1998. You're watching Marvel Mayhem, the series where I review every single Marvel movie, every single Marvel television series. So, Blade. Blade is, I think his name is Eric Drake originally, and he had something very unfortunate happen to him when he was a baby. His mother was bitten by a vampire and she died, but he was saved. So basically, he has the all of the powers of the vampires, except that he ages normally and he needs to have blood. So, because of these things, he decided that he is going to be a vampire hunter, and that's what he does. And he has a companion who makes weapons for him named Whistler, and Whistler is in it because, and Whistler is played by Chris Christopherson, and Blade is played by Wesley Snipes. And I think probably those are the most famous roles for both of them, or at least the most popular. Although Chris Christopherson was in one of the many versions of A Star Is Born, but now probably the version with Lady Gaga is more famous. But Chris Christopherson was in the one with Barbara Streisand. Um, yeah, and I don't know. It's weird for me that Chris Christopherson was a reasonably successful actor because he's a huge guy in kind of country folk music, and that's where I know him from most. And he's got like these really like political albums in the 80s. So if you're interested in country music, folk music, you should check him out. He's really, really good, but good in a very specific kind of way. And his acting is that way too. He's kind of like the epitome of a grumpy, curmudgeonly old white guy who helps people, which is what is in this movie. And Wesley Snipes acting in as Blade, I'll talk about in a moment, but I need to talk about the plot a little bit more. So what happens is that they are fighting these vampires, and there's this vampire rave that's put on by a character named Deacon Frost, and Blade comes in and he murders a bunch of vampires. Uh, and you might think, well, that's just murder, but the vampires have kind of kidnapped a real person, like a real person. They kidnapped a non-vampire person and invited him to this party, and then blood starts raining down, and then this guy's like, oh no, I gotta get out of here. So there's one vampire guy, non-vampire guy in this vampire party, and that's a little bit of a horrifying scene actually, because there's blood and he realizes what's happening and he's trying to get away, and then Blade comes in and starts murdering the vampires, and he gets rescued, and we don't see that guy anymore. So bit of a traumatic moment for him, and it's not exactly clear in this world of this movie if people really believe in vampires, if they understand that they exist or not. Because that's one of the fundamental things about a vampire movie is, do people know that vampires exist, or is it something that's like a secret from people? But so we don't know about that. Anyway, Blade attacks this rave and he kills everybody, and then the police show up and they see him, and like it's a really weird scene because the police don't immediately attack Blade, who's standing in front of a guy who's burning to death, and yet they kind of let him go, but they take the bird. So I thought maybe that Blade was working with the police and they knew what was going on, but they take the guy from the burning guy, the burning vampire guy. They take him to a hospital, and these two doctors are working on him. And there's like one character, I don't know what his name was, but she is I forgot what that character's name is. One second. Okay, Karen Jensen, played by Nabushi White. She's one of these doctors who are examining this fried corpse of a vampire who's still alive. And it's actually pretty interesting because they say, oh, there's some kind of weird thing about the blood. And she's a hematologist, which is the study of blood, I guess. And the other doctor has this sort of like thing where they were like dating before, and they have like this kind of like awkward moment of people who were dating before, and she's like, "Oh, you gotta leave me alone." And so the burned up vampire, he awakes and he bites the one doctor, and he has an unfortunate trajectory because he gets really like bitten and not exactly turned into a vampire, but the vampires, they get him. And then later there's a scene with Dr. Jensen and this guy, and he's been turned into a vampire and he's gone a little bit crazy, and they basically fed Jensen to him because he's a monster that eats everything, vampires and people and rats and whatever. So he's not exactly quite there. So it's kind of like suggesting if you have an irritating ex-boyfriend, he's going to turn into a monster. Which, maybe. I don't know. It depends on why that person was irritating. I felt a little bit bad for him because we didn't actually get the story of their relationship. It was just, she was momentarily irritated by the guy, and then he turns into an evil vampire. Not even an evil vampire, a sub-vampire kind of thing. Yes, but so she gets bitten too, but not as bad as that guy. And Blade kind of rescues her and tries to give her somewhat of a cure. Whistler does. And then they set her free and say, oh, you need to leave the city. And basically they use her as bait to kind of attract Deacon Frost to, to fight him. But he sends one of his familiars, and Blade beats him up. And Jensen is very upset about this because she's like, you used me. And it's one of those things where Blade, the character, has very few interactions with the female lead. And because they're he's the main lead and she's the female lead, they're going to end up together. Just because that's the type of movie this is. Anyway, so the main plot of the movie is that Deacon Frost is not a pure blood vampire, because in this world, vampires are actually born. It's not just that you get turned to a vampire, which I don't know how that would work, because obviously when you have a baby, if you don't know this, there's a lot of blood. So how would a vampire baby be born without the other vampires in the room getting like all, interested in what's happening? And maybe they go to human doctors. It's really weird. But anyway, there's like this class system of these pure blood vampires, and Deacon Frost is against this class system because he is like not a pure blood vampire. He was turned into a vampire. And the movie is really weird because vampires are supposed to have like these superpowers, but the purebloods, they don't do anything. They don't fight back. They're just snarky to Deacon Frost. And Deacon Frost kidnaps a bunch of them because, this is the main point of the plot, he's trying to do the sacrifice to resurrect the blood god, because they have this myth of the blood god who would like destroy humanity and, take the planet for vampires, I guess. So anyway, in the end, Deacon Frost becomes this blood god, and Blade and him have this fight, and Blade wins. Oh, and they have to get Blade's blood for this ritual as well because they need a Daywalker's blood. Yeah, so Blade is a Daywalker. And there's also a really weird part about it where um, his mom, Eric Drake's mom, so Blade's mom, died during childbirth. Like, that's the story. But at the end of the movie, she's alive and she's with Deacon Frost. So that means that Deacon Frost has been like monitoring Blade's existence for years because Blade at this point seems to be like a 40-year-old man. So Blade's been looking for the person who's killed his mother. And so Blade has been, Deacon Frost has been following him around. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense because also it's really weird because the mother character is like really sexual towards her son. And I guess the idea is that she's turned into a vampire, so she has no morality or whatsoever. But also, whether she died, the movie's saying she didn't die, so she got turned into a vampire. She got turned into a vampire. She had no interest in her son whatsoever. So she should have no feelings towards him at all. I guess the movie is just saying that Wesley Snipes' portrayal of Blade is just so sexy that everybody wants to be with him. All right, so that's the main plot of the movie. But is the movie actually any good? As I said, no. No, it's not. It's not bad, but it's not good either. So the thing that makes the movie not good, for the most part, is the special effects. This movie relied heavily on CGI in 1998, so it kind of looks like Mortal Kombat fatalities. That's the level of CGI we're working with. So, for example, when somebody gets staked, they kind of like, they disintegrate. And I think they used the same sort of effect in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it looked better, which is weird because that was a television show and this is a big budget movie production. And there's also, so that's kind of understandable, but then because Jensen is a hematologist, she comes up with some way of making some, and the kind of technobabble actually kind of makes a lot of sense in this movie, so that's a positive for it. But anyway, so they treat the vampiric condition as sort of like a blood infection, and that people can be infected. She calls it a sexually transmitted disease, which is probably true, right? But anyway, she comes up with this method where she can inject vampiric blood with some substance, and it has an explosive reaction. And so she's trying to find a cure, and that's how she comes up with it. So it kind of makes a lot of sense, actually, that you would come up with things that don't work as a cure. So that part is really good. But anyway, the visual effect so they've been using this, they use this as a weapon to blow up people, and they use it with this guy at the end, Deacon Frost, and oh my god, it just looks so bad. It looks horrible, 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 horrible. He just like puffs up into bubbles and stuff. And you can tell that the people who were doing the effects were like, oh, this is going to be so great. It's going to be so awesome. People are going to love this effect. But I think like special effects are really, really hard because you have to do something that is unbelievable because basically you're trying to make a guy, his blood explode inside of his body, but you have to make it look realistic. Like, how would that look, like blood exploding in your body? And it's weird because no one has ever, I don't think anyone has ever seen blood explode in a person's body, but we still know what it would look like, because like subconsciously we know what rain looks like. We know all of these things because we experience the universe. So if a special effect doesn't look quite right, we don't suspend our disbelief. And I mean, it depends on the movie, right? little puppet Grogu, we will suspend our disbelief. And the CGI of Ruta the Hutt will suspend our disbelief. But in this movie, I think I can deal with the disintegrating skeleton effect. I can suspend my disbelief for that, but the exploding blood, I think it doesn't work. And the last thing to talk about is Wesley Snipes' acting, or lack thereof. So you can tell it's clearly a movie where the actor does a line or does a look, and then there's a cut, and then the stuntman takes over the fight scenes. So the fight scenes are not great, they're not bad, but I don't know. I can tell why this is Wesley Snipes' iconic role, because it sort of suits him perfectly. He's not, I don't know. I think maybe in White Men Can't Jump, he's more charismatic than in this movie. But he's basically like this archetype of an action hero from the 80s, right? He's got all like the one-liners, and it's clear that they don't know how to write a like a superhero character, right? Because this is based on Marvel, and Blade is a character in Marvel. And so it's partly the writing, but it's partly the delivery. And about the writing, there are like some lines that don't make any sense. Like in the final confrontation with Deacon Frost, Blade says, "Oh, some beep are always trying to ice skate uphill." And it's like, that was the it's weird because that's the first time Blade ever uses any metaphors like that. Usually his sentences are like, "Oh, you're dead. Ooh, I'm here. Ooh, the world you know is not the real world." Very simple sentences. So it's enjoyable, and I don't think that any other actor would have done a comparable job to Wesley Snipes, but it's not a great movie. It's not even like, you have really good movies you can enjoy, good movies that you can enjoy, then you have like bad movies that are unenjoyable, and then you have bad movies that are super enjoyable, and then you have kind of like movies. So this movie is it's not too crazy, but it's neither very good nor bad. So actually I would give it like a 5 out of 10 if I'm rating it. And one thing that I noticed on the Wikipedia article that I wanted to talk about just very, very briefly is that it says, without any sources, that this is the first successful Marvel movie. And that's not true. Because Men in Black was also very successful, came out before this movie, and that was a Marvel movie. And I've done so many Marvel movies, and I'm doing them chronologically now. I'm trying to think if there was a successful movie before Men in Black, and I don't think so. They weren't like DC, where they had huge hits in the beginning, because this is actually even before X-Men. And there was an X-Men movie called X Generations or something for TV that was a failure. So I can see why people would think this is the first successful one, but no, actually, the first blockbuster was Men in Black. And I think Men in Black is a better movie because the special effects hold up. And it's the same kind of vibe, right? You have a wisecracking character, although Will Smith's character talks a lot more in that movie than Blade does. But yeah, so it's the same kind of vibe. I just personally prefer Men in Black. I think it's one of the best Marvel movies ever. And this is not in the worst pile, but not in the best pile, as I said. All right, so I'm trying to be the most prolific reviewer of all time. If you like what I do, please leave a like. Please leave a comment. Subscribe. All of those things can help the algorithm. And I'm trying to get to 15,000 reviews. So this is probably like 500 and something review. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. 500 reviews. My God. But I've been doing it for like 2 years now. Yeah, so anyway, bye. What an ending. What a professional.